Welcome to another day in paradise. So today we have a very special guest. We have Leah Helbling on, and Leah came to us from our dear friend Cass Midgley from Everyone's Agnostic. And Cass, I asked him, who are some of your favorite guests that we want to bring onto the show? And he said, you got to bring Leah on. So that's how we got to Leah. And we're going to talk to her about how her 12-year-old son convinced her to leave the Evangelical church. And we're going to do that on
a
wonderful
chaos. Oh, shit.
I told you. That is too funny.
I was clicking the logo.
Oh, you turned the logo on and off? That's great. Yeah, I've almost done that. I know that. I know that trap.
So, how do we always bring people in connection with religion?
You know, the one thing I think is beautiful about A Wonderful Chaos is that we often don't really decide. We ask people that we love and care about to sort of introduce us to people they think would be really good for the show.
Yeah.
And what I'm finding is a lot of people somehow have a similar message as they've come out of the church and they've basically shared that story of what they had to go through. And I think it's kind of interesting because I think the social pressure of church is so great in certain parts of the world that to leave the church is a really big deal. Like for me, as a kid, you know, I used to tell my mom that I was going to go to church on Sunday and I went to watch World Wrestling Federation. And she knew I was going to watch World Wrestling Federation at my friend's house. But the thing is like, as long as we kept the illusion alive, it was okay. But the thing was that as we've spoken to a lot of guests, they've had to go through a lot of turmoil to leave the church. And had different experiences. And the reason why this story for me was so interesting was because in Leah's story, it's a quality that we talk about on the show a lot. And it's something that I must say I live in deep admiration of. And it's the admiration of holding your beliefs lightly. So how do we go through life where we have really strong ideas of what we want and how we want it, and at the same time allow ourselves the ability to hold lightly? You know, I always say, take seriously, hold lightly.
And within that frame, there's a spaciousness to explore and even explore other perspectives and ideas.
Yeah. And I think when people do that, it speaks so much to their character, because in some ways, once we get indoctrinated into one way of thinking, and then we no longer will experience any other way of thinking, we sort of, as far as I'm concerned, we're sort of already, how would you say, we're kind of lost the passion almost to grow. Because if it doesn't reaffirm what I think I already know, then I'm not growing anymore. I'm only taking in affirmative information that supports my belief. And then when she told me in our kind of pre setup for this show that it was her 12-year-old son that was the one who precipitated her leaving the church, that was like another blow of my mind, because I thought, think about it, like in some weird ways, the simplicity and the ease with which a child looks at the world, you could say that they see things far clearer than we adults who create all of these weird constructs to make sense of stuff. You know, and so I thought, wow, so she's allowing herself to be influenced from her 12-year-old and then rediscover whatever she thinks reality is. And I just my heart opened up when I thought about that. Yeah.
What's coming up for me though, as you're speaking and you're saying things like, yeah, I want to celebrate the 12-year-old, but in a way, I also want to make clear that there is no right or wrong in being in the religion or not being in the religion.
Sure. But why do you say that now? Because I didn't have that in my mind at all.
I think it's the way you phrased it. My brain was like, "Oh, it's a good thing that this happened," but I guess it has. I want to also contextualize it.
Okay.
And I have no idea what the context was in this case.
Well, the context for me is only that an individual is allowing themselves to be influenced so that they can rediscover what reality is. So, but nice point. Like, I think one of the things is we're not here to bash religion. For me or for you, I don't think I have had any negative experience. I see it serves a purpose for many, and I think that's great.
Yeah.
And I think that religion, like any belief, if we allow ourselves to be influenced by others and to rethink whatever we've come to believe, that speaks to an individual. So that's more of what I was focusing on, especially for this show.
Nice. Yeah. Thanks for the clarity.
Yeah.
I mean, I come from Cyprus, and I would pretty much get beaten if I didn't go to church.
Wow.
Church was really a big thing growing up. And I even had to go to Sunday school. Oh my God. And as a child, that was scary.
Oof. I didn't know you actually did all that. No, it's amazing. Yeah.
Well, the thing is, because we introduced 12-year-old, my brain linked it. Between the ages of 9 and 12, 13, I went to Sunday school.
Yeah, well, I mean, I had to go to Sunday school as well, by the way. And then I went to my first communion at 13, right? I still have the pictures with me dressed in the white suit and stuff.
Oh, God. I'd love to see that. The funny thing is, though, I always had a very, very difficult time learning things if I couldn't embody them. So the idea that I had to learn passages and recite them, I had such a hard time. It was really, I used to cry because I couldn't understand and I couldn't learn.
Yeah, and the funny thing is that in some ways you would have had to let go of your rational brain in order to understand. By the way, as you already see, we knew we were going to be lit up with comments from Bolalong, who's already begun to make some comments. And we know, Bolalong, your experience in South Africa has been quite negative. So we just switched sides so you can feel more comfortable, because I know we were on the wrong side. And I know that I think, Bambos, when you went to that statement of we don't want to beat up on religion, it confused me, I have to say, because there was nothing spoken about it. So I was actually wondering what was the undercurrent for you there.
I kind of saw that I projected, and because I projected, I kind of thought that other people could also project that.
Nice, got it, cool. Well, I think it would be great to bring Leah on now.
There she is.
Hello.
Good afternoon.
So how does it feel to be admired by two people you barely know?
Great. I love admiration from strangers.
Nice.
Yeah, it builds my confidence and my security.
Did anything in the introduction we say not connect with your experience, or what?
Oh my gosh. I mean, this is still such an emotionally charged part of my life that, you guys are sharing, tears well up in my eyes. Yeah. And I continue to struggle with the welcoming and the being okay with religion in our society, because, like, for me personally, it caused a lot of harm in my own life, to my own psyche, to my family, to my children. And still to this day amongst our family situation and relationships. And so I struggle with allowing people to think critically, and to be set in their ways, and to be unwilling to ask the questions that we challenged our kids to ask when they were young. And so it's difficult for me, because I believe faith often, especially in the evangelical church or evangelical Catholicism or evangelical anything, it really is the enemy to open and honest questions, right? To like be willing and able to like ask all those questions about what it is you believe to be true about how the world works. If you can't even ask those questions about the worldview that you hold, that's problematic. And unfortunately, in a lot of church traditions, that is the status quo. You can't start asking or start reading books or listening to podcasts or watching debates where there are people who think differently than you, because that is a door that can open you up to demonic influences, or, you know, and you're heading down that road down into deconstruction, which is true. Like somehow they know that that's what's going to happen. So they try to keep the lock on those doors and don't want you to enter in, because that is oftentimes what does end up happening. And it's what happened in my family situation.
Wow.
So, Leah, my question is, like, I don't know if I want to address the 12-year-old Leah or to start talking about your 12-year-old son. In a way, I'm curious, what was your journey up to that point? As how did you relate to religion? How did it play a part in your life?
So I actually grew up, my parents were kind of old world hippies. There was no religion in my family of origin. But my father's parents, my paternal grandparents, were super religious folks. And my dad was kind of the black sheep of his family because he did not buy into the, you know, that worldview. But we spent a lot of time at my grandparents' house. They owned a farm about 5 miles away from where I lived, and we would go up there and work the gardens and hang out with the animals. And my family, my parents' home with them was very chaotic. My parents had a very difficult relationship. There was lots of angry yelling and not a peace-filled environment. But my grandparents' home, when I was a child, I thought it had that peace somehow. You know, we would go up there, we would hang out, have family dinners, we would read the Bible after dinner together around the table. We would pray before bedtime and we would sing songs, and there was just this peace that I felt there, you know, and I associated that as a child to having something to do with the religion. And so then as I went off to college, I went to a Christian college on a basketball scholarship and was now surrounded like every corner by religious folks. You know, my roommates, my suite mates, my basketball coach. I was just in this sphere of all religious folks, but that was not me. So I chose religion that freshman year of college and thought that it answered a lot of those questions for me. It made a lot of sense at the time, up until I started thinking critically about it. But and I was the kind of person who, if I'm going to do something, I'm going to do it with both feet, you know, the right way. None of this lukewarm shit. Like, we're all in. And that was me. And just kept getting all in and deeper into it, especially when I had children. You know, because I had to raise them in the right way that they needed to go so they would not part from the truth. And so, yeah, every year it just got deeper and deeper and more serious about my faith, because I believe that's what I was supposed to do as a Christian homeschool mom and a Christian wife and a leader in the church. I had to become holy and perfect so that I could lead those under my flock, you know?
Yeah, it's interesting because if I hear you, in some ways it's kind of, I see there's that formative years when you go off to college and you're just starting to form an identity and you want to belong. And I can identify, because I know that in my own journey. And what I find fascinating is that when you adopted this identity, and I'm assuming that you also created a network of people around you who reaffirmed that identity. So
sure.
It must have been doubly as hard to start to unwind that, because to some degree, you're not only identified by what you choose to believe, but by the individuals you surround yourself that share those beliefs.
Oh, for sure. We were completely swimming in the evangelical waters as a young family. You know, we had our church circles, and then we chose to homeschool our children. So then we had our very conservative evangelical homeschool circles. And yeah, we were pretty much surrounded with folks who thought similarly to how we thought and raised their children in a similar way. And yet, we homeschooled, but this is kind of where my parental homeschool hippie folks that raised me kind of came into to affect our lives. Is like we were homeschoolers, but we were eclectic unschoolers, which meant that we allowed our children to kind of pursue their education on their own. Like what do they want? What do you want to learn about? Like dive in deep to that. Like we didn't have a set Christian curriculum that they were having to follow. Because I firmly believe that if what I believe was the truth, if Christianity as I believed it was true, we could ask all of the questions and it would still come up as being truth. And so I had no qualms whatsoever about allowing my kids to be critical thinkers because I was so convinced that this Christianity thing was true. Yeah, and so let them ask away.
It would withstand whatever they came to you
exactly
with. By the way, one thing that baffles me as you speak, because we'll get to your son, because that fascinates me, of course. But the fact is, you got together with your husband, who was also evangelical. Now, that's got to be insane, because in one weird way, it's like I've always said, when you join a relationship, you kind of share values. And then the journey you take as each individual kind of grows. And then you don't know if you still share the same values. So how is it to be in the relationship and join in this sort of mutual religious shared vision, and then have that sort of start to pull apart?
Yeah, it's been tough. It's been really tough. When we first met in college, he was a Catholic and I was my grandparents, the evangelical Baptists, told me Catholics were not true Christians, when I was a kid. So he was a Catholic who his family actually read the Bible and did biblical studies. And so I was drawn to him. And I mean, he was kind of a cute, sexy guy too, but I wasn't supposed to be thinking along those lines. But we were able to really make that work well. He's not so serious about his faith and kind of never was. So I kind of took a lot of that lead for sending us deeper and deeper and down the evangelical tunnels. But he actually deconverted from religion before I did. Wow. He was the one, when my son first started questioning, was able to not be intimidated by the questions that my son was asking. He was able to show up fully for my son and to treat him with loving kindness and respect. And so before too long, he too claimed to be a non-believer. Shortly after, he started listening to the same podcast and reading the same books that my son was recommending that he read. And it was less than a year later where I was calling him out for failing to be a quality Christian husband and leading our family. And he finally said to me, Leah, I can't do these things that you want me to do. I can't do them. I don't believe this anymore. And so now I was like, holy shit. Now my son has left, my husband has left, and I had this martyr complex where now I was ultimately the one responsible for leading our family, leading them back to Christ, and continuing to raise my children my girls in the church so that they would not leave the faith. So it was real rough going for a long time. Wow. We're still struggling to this day.
But why? So by the way, first of all, I would have assumed you were the one to go out first. So that's quite amazing to start with.
I wish I could call. I wish.
But when you said you're still having troubles, I can't understand why you still have troubles, because it feels like you made it through so much. So where are you still having troubles?
Well, one of the pieces for me is trying to become that good Christian wife, that Proverbs 31 woman, is that I relinquished all of these pieces of myself. My autonomy, my sexuality, my strong personality, my ability to speak up for what I believe to be true. I relinquished those pieces of myself to become what I thought at the time was a better Christian mom and wife. And so I've had to take back those pieces. I'm claiming them as my own again, and I'm attempting to return to that. But, we were married for 20 years with me continuing to be that subservient woman. And so it's been a little bit challenging, I went back to college and I just started working full time for the first time in the last 6 months. And so there's all these things, you know, money and authority and who makes the decisions in our house, and you know, and even like sexuality and relationships, you know, like that's something that I've discovered, that there's a lot of these polyamorous relationships with people who are not in the church. And that's something that I've talked about being interested in pursuing. And my husband is like, nope, absolutely not. It's you and me, one man, one woman. And so those are the kinds of things that we're struggling through still, but I don't know how we would be doing if one of us was still in the church and the other out. I don't know how relationships survive that. That would be very, very gruesome, very difficult.
As you speak, I just need to tell you, I love you. Like, I mean, you are just the sweetest person. Like, it's funny because I have no clue why Cass says, Andy, you got to have Leah on. But as you speak, I'm just like, wow, I just sit in deep gratitude for that journey, because what I hear is this, and I see this quality. I have a dear friend also who left the Mormon church, and he's speaking very similarly to you. We had him on the show as well, that it's almost like, it sounds like you get to rediscover life, and you're not putting boundaries in like you had before. So it's there's a weird, you know, and we often talk about the pendulum. If you've suppressed one thing like sexuality, then it's almost like, now I want to go all the way to the other side and have a full experience, because I feel like I'd lost those years. But there's a beauty in your voice, and I hear it often when people start to explore without judgment. And that was I just wanted to celebrate that. As
Thank you.
Yeah.
It's a beautiful space to be in, you know, but I kind of get pissed off at the church for like stealing that from me, or for telling me that I wasn't good the way that I was when I was a 19-year-old.
Yeah.
You know, so like that's a lot of years I've lost. Like I'm, you know, we're getting up there in age, and it pisses me off. And I don't even know. I just want to have the freedom to do the things that I want to do. You know, and even if I end up not ever being involved in a polyamorous relationship, I want to have the freedom to choose for myself how I want to live my life without anyone else telling me.
Yeah.
You know, it's not your business. It's my business. And so, yeah.
I think that's the point, actually, on a lot of ways. It's, you know, with Ronnie, my wife, we'll speak very freely. Like, we get to talk about everything. There's nothing that we will limit about discussion. That doesn't mean we have to act on it, but we'll never suppress a feeling, because then that becomes resentment at some point. So it feels like you're balancing a little bit of this newfound freedom with, how does this affect my partner who maybe is not looking to explore the same things I am.
Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Nice.
Yeah, and then trying to decide, right? Like, is this am I willing to be in a relationship with these boundaries? Are these the boundaries that I want to continue to be in relationship with?
Yeah.
Or not? You know, and then I have the freedom to make that decision. And it's hard. I have a ton of friends who are no longer married, who have left the faith, you know, for one reason or another. Like, it just is hard to work out. And I don't know, I've been very fortunate in that I have a husband who's pretty bomb guy, you know. He's amazing. And I don't know.
I think we should have him on the next show.
Yeah, exactly. Holding my wife through dramatic change.
Was there, between you joining this college up until your son talked to you, was there any moments where you would like peek into another reality and then push it away?
Yes, constantly, regularly. So I gave my life to Christ between my first and second semesters of college. So I was off on my own at this Christian college, and got a DUI. I was not being a very good Christian at this Christian college before I chose Christ. I got a DUI. And the stress of all of that was just like eating me up. And I was like lying in bed one night, and I just was feeling like such a shitty person, you know, like, oh my gosh, I'm horrible. And I cried out to God, and I was like, God, if you're there, if you can just take this pain away and help me get through this situation, I will follow you all the days of my life. So I felt like my stomach pain, like that anxiety kind of went away. And so that was the day I chose Christ. that next semester, we had mandatory Bible chapel like 3 days a week at this school. And during that semester, Tony Campolo, who is a very famous evangelical preacher, he's the guy that Bill Clinton called when he got into trouble with Monica Lewinsky. He's the guy that got called to come help him with his spiritual life.
Mm-hmm.
He was coming to speak at my college at chapel one day. And I was like, oh, this is cool, but there was all this controversy on campus because he was not the right kind of Christian. Right. He was like this left-wing evangelical, like he was a social justice guy. And my campus was more right-wing Republican campus leaning. And so and I didn't know, I'm a new Christian. I don't know what the hell's going on. And there's this controversy on campus between my friends and my suite mates about why are we letting this guy come speak on campus? So that was kind of like, I thought we were all on the same team. Like, how can we be disagreeing about this kind of stuff? So that was early on. That was like 2 or 3 months after I became a Christian. And then there were always, when I would read my Bible and study my Bible, and there were like God, like killing people, commanding like genocides, or Jesus telling us to forsake our families and follow him. And I would take those questions to my leaders, whether it was a professor, whether that was a Sunday school teacher, whether that was a pastor. And I would ask these questions. And there were never quality answers that were given to me. God, we don't know. God is mysterious. We just don't know why, but we need to trust that he is good. And so I would just stuff those questions back down, and, until they would bubble up again the next time. And then, and I struggled with the LGBTQ stuff. I have an aunt who is a lesbian, and there was a time where she was getting married to her partner. Gay marriage had just been legalized in California, and my mom was actually taking a trip out there and taking my son on this visit out there to visit her sister, my aunt. And then my aunt drops this bomb that she's getting married. And I'm like, my son can't go to that wedding. Like, you can't take my son to that wedding. Because I really feared that there would be something that he was exposed to that would deconstruct him or make him be gay too, or whatever. So my mom, in her graciousness, took my son and his cousins out on this trip, but left before her sister got married. And like, looking back now, I'm so appalled, and I've apologized to both of them. But so I hated the way that the church taught me to judge people who were different than myself. And so the LGBTQ community, the Black and brown folks, pro-life versus pro-choice people, like, there were just all these things that I could not square in my head, but I would just
you find a way to park it, because whatever it's giving you overall, you're still buying into. I remember when I was young, I always had a struggle, and it was a funny struggle, because I always thought to myself, so I was born Catholic, and you need to be Catholic in order to go to heaven, but there's all these people born in other places where they're in their own religions, and they didn't choose to be born there. They were just born there. They don't know of any. So now they don't get to go to heaven because they weren't born in a place where this religion, and it always was so weird for me to think, how is it that we get to decide that this is the right one and all the other ones are the wrong ones, where everyone else is saying the same, right? That was a lingering dilemma for me from a very young age.
Doesn't make any sense.
I'd love to understand. So you touched on it a little bit, but I'd love to go into it a little. So what I understood is that you really did the unschooling. And when we say unschooling, I mean, I've done a lot of discussion around it. So it's basically allowing your child to discover on their own. And through that discovery, they'll guide their own learning. And when he now is going into this sort of questions, what kind of questions is he asking you? And how is it showing up? Like, did he one day come to you and say, hey, I just want to study religion? Or is it like, hey, this said it in the Bible and I don't understand how that works in real? Like, how did it evolve in the family?
Well, about this time in our lives, the Creation Museum was opening up across the river. I live in Cincinnati, Ohio, and across the river is Kentucky. And Ken Ham and Answers in Genesis Ministries were opening up this creation museum in Kentucky, about a half an hour from our house. And, you know, my husband was a school teacher. I was a stay-at-home mom.
By the way, sorry, just help us, because I don't know if Bambos, I know what the Creation Museum is. I don't know if Bambos does. Could you just share with him so that he also knows what you're talking about?
Sure. So amongst evangelicals, and definitely evangelical Christian families, there is this belief in young earth creationism, that the earth is about 6,000 years old. And they believe that you should be interpreting the Bible literally from Genesis 1:1. If you're already questioning the Bible's literalness at Genesis 1:1, how in the world are you going to be able to believe any of the other things in the rest of the Bible? And so they really believe that the earth was created in 6 24-hour days, and then God rested on the seventh day. So I was a biology major in college. Like, I never bought into this stuff, you know, but in our homeschool communities, this was huge. Like, if you were a good homeschool family, you believed in young earth creationism.
Mm-hmm.
And so here we are right across the river. We have the Creation Museum, and it's this ginormous museum. It's like $37 million museum or something. Like, it's not just some podunk little shed, you know, in Kentucky, like you would expect. And so part of their funding to build this place is they would ask for donations. And so a number of people at our church and our communities would donate like $1,000 to this facility to be built. And so when you donated, like as a lifetime member, that $1,000, you got these passes that you could share with your friends and family, like as an evangelical tool. And so we were poor, you know, like I didn't work home. Like, we loved field trips, but it was often hard to find the money to go do field trips. So friends would offer us these passes, like, hey, Leah, do you want to take the kids to the Creation Museum anytime soon? And it was a pretty dynamic place. There's amazing fossil displays. Like, they have this pretty cool planetarium. It's kind of like a amusement park feel in some means. They did a really nice job as they're trying to convert you to their belief in young earth creationism. And so we would go there on field trips. And after one of these field trips, my son said to me the next day, he said, hey, Mom, can you and I go back there, just the two of us, because we have younger kids in the family. And he's like, I'd like to just go back to this one exhibit and look at it a little bit more in detail. And I was like, yeah, sure, we'll figure that out. So, you know, that required finding babysitters for the girls and us. So I don't know how long it was before we got back there. And he knew exactly where he wanted to go. So we went to this exhibit, and it was an exhibit that tries to explain how after the flood, after Noah's flood, this huge global flood, how the animals repopulated the earth. And, you know, in this timeline that they have, if Noah's flood was like 4,500 years ago, then somehow, you know, these animals have to make it to Australia and North America. How does that happen? It's got to happen quickly. And like, there's no fossil record of these animals. Like, there's no kangaroo fossils that have been found in like the Middle East. So how did they get there? And so this presentation basically states that there were these land masses, like vegetative masses and floats, where the animals found themselves upon, and then via the ocean currents, they very quickly made their way to all of these other continents. And so, like, you know, my son and I are trying to talk about this and trying to figure out, I don't really buy into young earth creationism, but I know that I'm supposed to be a good homeschool mom and like direct him this way. And so, like, I'm reading it to him, and I'm kind of like, can't you see how that could work? Like, doesn't that make sense? And he's just like, no, this doesn't make any sense to me. No. So, you know, I'm like, shrugging my shoulders and like, well, that's what they say. And that just kind of propelled him, like he's a really smart kid and was always asking questions. That just propelled him on this journey to start reading all these religious books. He read the Quran. He read like Mein Kampf too, but he read the Bible multiple times. He started listening.
Leah, he's 12 years old.
I know.
Are you kidding me? He's 12
He's
years
awesome.
old and he's reading the Quran to try to corroborate what's now being stated at the Creation Museum. This is incredible.
My son is like my hero. He's my hero. I got him this cute a friend of mine makes these like little Yoda thingies, and he loves Star Wars. And so you can like put like any whatever you want Yoda to say. Mm-hmm. And I got him one that said like, "You are my hero." Like, and like I was not a great mom during this time because I was really thrown off kilter by these questions, because the truth should come back to showing that this worldview is true. So I made him go to church. I made him read the Bible and still do these, like my unschooling ways that I had lived up to that point was like, you got to equal out this study. When you listen to Bart Ehrman versus William Lane Craig, you also got, you got to be reading the Bible. Anyway, I was very caught off guard, and I was not kind to him often. I remember this knockdown, drag-out fight that we had where I was angry with him for continuing to do this research and read these books by Christopher Hitchens and Richard Dawkins and Sam Harris, and I was just, but my husband showed up in a big, big way. And they went on this camping trip every summer, and it was about time for this camping trip. And so my husband says to Josh, he's like, "Why don't you download some of those debates, at the time onto CDs, and we'll listen to them as we drive down to the Smoky Mountains for camping." And so my husband got back from that week-long trip, and he's like, "Leah, Josh, there's some really great arguments that these guys are bringing to the table here in these debates. Like, I think we need to listen to Josh." But it probably took me about 2 years before I felt comfortable diving into some of the conversations and the resources that they had been diving into.
I want to like slow one thing down and kind of connect back to you on one level, because on one level I see that it's almost like when you talk, I sense that you judge the former you, and I'm sitting in admiration of who you are, not because of what you had to do, but we don't define ourselves by what we've done. We define ourselves at the moments when we're in adversity and how we address it. So you're looking at what you didn't do, and I'm looking at what you had to do to make it to where you are today, and that's amazing. So in some weird way, I almost feel like your focus is sadly on the thing where, like, you were 17 when you went to college. You needed, or whatever the age was, you wanted identity. We all want that. Hopefully you don't get stuck in drugs or in bad patterns, but in some weird way, it's almost like I would even say, look at how little time it took you to make peace with the thing, as opposed to you could have died, you could have been on your deathbed. I've seen some people go that long and say, "Oh my God, I lost my life," and it's really you just allowed yourself to move through this. I just wanted to make sure that we focused on the beautiful part, on not the part where there's you were a bad person.
Yeah, that's tough. I'm currently working with a religious therapy specialist. Counselor right now, because I am caught up on that. I have so many regrets about primarily the way that I treated Josh during those years, that I was unable to just welcome all of those questions and do as my husband did. And like, even today, he's a young adult today, he's 24 today. And like, we're not as close. We don't have as an intimate relationship as I would like. And I blame a lot of that on these years that were so difficult for us, and and where I didn't show up in my best as his mom. And we've had some conversations about it, and I've asked his forgiveness, and he seems to really understand it well. But it's still a matter of me learning how to forgive myself, and some days I do a great job, but then when I think about, some of those memories and my inability to enter into his world in a way that I would have been proud of, it's hard.
Well, let's say this: you've given Josh the opportunity, as we all get, is what's the thing in life we need to make peace with in ourselves so that we can heighten our consciousness. And I can guarantee you, the people that have the most stable lives are not interesting to be around at all.
Yeah, true story.
Bolalong is stating a lot of things. I'm not going to put them on because I'm on my phone and I'm worried if I press buttons, it's going to make real messes. But obviously, we already knew that he was not going to be fond of the Creation Museum, as he calls it, a scam. But he says, this is an amazing son you have, Leah. I only started reading the Bible multiple times when I was 17. So Bolalong is in South Africa. He also is clearly left, and he's had a very bad experience. And he also says, I love Josh. I love this courage. This is really beautiful.
Same.
Yeah.
Same. He's pretty dynamic.
Yeah. We have a comment from Neil Vanderland. And he says, it must take a lot of mental fortitude to make the leap from religion to being an atheist or non-believer, wondering how you are finding the faith in yourself or in life, which you found in religion.
Good question.
Beautiful.
Yeah, it's been a challenge, to find a new community, to find other people who think similarly to I do, who have been. But I tell you, Cass Midgley and the Everyone's Agnostic podcast, that was like life for me. Those years where I was deconverting and I had no one. When I started reading and looking into these resources that Josh and my husband had recommended, I didn't tell them. Like I didn't want them to know that I was starting down this journey too. Like I did it all by myself. And so I didn't have a local community. I wasn't talking to anybody, but I found people online who had gone through similar situations that I did. And so I've been able to have mentors in that field who are ahead of me in that process. And I've been really fortunate in our Cincinnati area as I started a women's group, Women Beyond Faith, and our group where we met regularly to kind of talk with other women who had gone through similar journeys. I started a podcast called Women Beyond Faith, where we're doing just that, providing spaces for women to tell their stories. And we have a pretty neat little humanist community in Cincinnati. Interestingly, Tony Campolo, who was one of the guys responsible for my first doubt as a Christian, his son lives in Cincinnati, Bart Campolo, and Bart is a deconverted evangelical Christian. And Bart and I have been leaders of a humanist community in Cincinnati for the last 4 years or so. So I have been able to rebuild my security as a human being and as a woman slowly, but I have had amazing people that I have been able to surround myself with that have helped me to encourage me in that journey. And but it's a struggle, even like days when I have to make a tough decision where I would have just prayed about it and felt like God was directing me one way or the other. Now I have to I am fully responsible for making these decisions. I was then too, I just didn't know it. But like it's hard sometimes, where sometimes I wish that there were some kind of, guy up there in the sky that somehow cared and gave a shit about what I wanted to do and was directing me. But I'm having fun practicing, learning how to do that, It's been good. And my counselor is she's so good for me, my therapist, my religious trauma therapist, in reminding me that unlike Christianity, where there was often one right answer and one wrong answer, life doesn't work that way. There's a plethora of answers. Yeah. And like I get to choose, and maybe I make a mistake, but it doesn't really matter. I just learn from that and move on. And so I'm still a work in progress, and I'm sure I will be until the day I leave this earth.
Join the club. It was funny because as you spoke, I remember as a young kid, my dad, who I never got along with all that well, he always used to say, "Andy, I am God." And it was just now I realized, wow, I always judged him for saying that, but now actually I'm wondering, maybe he had more insight than I was aware of at the time. Amazing. The thing that I've noticed with a community of the people that have left the church, they're very strong. When Bambos and I have guests on, I think you heard Bambos how we started, like we're not anti-religion. I think in some ways we're so self-conscious because when we bring people on who left the church, there's like another identity that's formed, which is so powerful that in a weird way, we're like, we're not a platform for now. We're just, everyone's welcome here. But in some funny way, there's been a really strong identity with religion is bad, like really, you know, we haven't even posted half of Bolalong's, our friend in South Africa's comments, but Bolalong is like, you know, when it comes to anything, you know, anything when someone says, if God, like I remember, because I'll follow him on Facebook and someone wrote to him once, if God's willing, it'll happen. And then Bolalong said, God has nothing to do with it. And then it started a long chain of emails. Oh.
Yeah, I really struggle with speaking kindly toward religion. I mean, we still, most of our family is still in the church. Like my husband's family is super Catholic, all in Catholic. And I have a nephew currently who's discerning whether or not he should go into the priesthood.
Wow.
They don't believe in birth control. They don't believe in abortions. They don't believe in gay marriage.
Leah.
Many of them politically, you know, are huge conspiracy theorists and Trump supporters.
Yeah.
And I feel greatly judged by them, and as do my children.
I was going to say, you don't feel, you are being judged by them. I've got a question for you.
Yeah.
Bambos.
Well, it wasn't a question. I was going to say, and you're still healing.
Yeah.
Like the idea that you need to be any different than what you are right now.
Yeah.
It's part of the healing process. And I even see that you being on the podcast right now, talking, daring to share.
Yeah.
God knows who's going to watch this, including God.
Yeah.
And you'll be judged.
Yeah.
And of course, there's also people like Neil van der Laan and Boerland who are celebrating your journey. And we have here Neil van der Laan again, who says, wow, impressive how you decided to start that journey without people close to you, but found people going in the same direction and was able to put faith in them and yourself. Thank you for your answer.
Mm-hmm.
Thank you.
You know, it's funny, now that I'm on the road, I usually jot notes of words that I want to come back to ask. And now since I'm traveling, I have none of my papers. So I'm always with you and I'm like lost. Whatever I had to think about is gone in my head right now. I did have something that I wanted to ask though that came up as you were speaking. You know, the one thing that caught me when you were talking, you were discussing how it evolved with your husband.
Mm-hmm.
There was some things that it was interesting because I always thought that leaving religion was leaving the groups and the beliefs, and I neglected that there was an indoctrination that occurred that now you have to sort of wean yourself off of. And I'm wondering, like, how is that process for you? Like, I mean, how is it like day to day? Where do you see it showing up?
There were a number of years when I was still in the church and I wanted to go back to school, you know, like my career post kids. And my husband would be like, you don't need to do that now. You know, like we're good. Money's fine. You know, we're good. Like it would be easier if you didn't do that right now. And I'd be like, yeah, good point. Okay. And so that never really went away. And my husband's very frugal, you know, and so the first thing he's always thinking about is dollar signs. How much is that going to cost me? And so there came a point after I had deconverted where I was just, I'm going back to school. I've got my classes registered. I'm starting January the 7th. You know, I'm not asking your permission. this is what I am doing. And so that's unusual. That was unusual in our relationship. You know, typically it would be a let's talk about this. And he often had his default was what we ended up, and he never was like a controlling kind of a husband at all. I often would be the one like, okay, we can do that. That's fine. So that's a way. How we spend our money now that I have a job is a way that I'm, you know, like showing up. I started traveling and vacationing on my own without him. Yeah. So like I'm going to Europe with a friend, and one of my first trips to Europe with a friend. Well, actually, this was by myself when I went to a number of places by myself, but I went on a pilgrimage to the Geological Society of London.
Yeah.
Which is one of my favorite places because like one of my biggest I don't know, not mentors, but kind of. He's like a geologist. Like William Smith is like the modern geologist. He's like from the 1800s. Anyway, long story short, he used to draw these like huge maps of geology and the different strata where the different fossils were formed. Because once I realized for sure that young Earth creationism was all BS, I started researching about real geology. And so I took a pilgrimage to London to this guy's to see his map, and it's like hidden behind all of these like curtains. And so you show up at this society into the lobby and you tell them you want to see William Smith's map, and like they go up there and you stand on this platform and they like they draw the curtains. And then here comes this map that he drew in like 40 or something. And so like things like that. I'm just taking back my independence. I'm not asking him to go travel. You know, I'm traveling. I'm going to be in Paris by myself for the weekend, you know, and that freedom. And I know it's probably a little unsettling for him. At least it was early on.
Well, if you're doing that and the same time talking about polygamy, then clearly he's going to be like, wow, this isn't so comfortable, you know?
Yeah, true. Yeah. I mean, I think he trusts me, but you never know. Yeah.
Yeah. The Frenchmen, you can't.
True. True.
It sounds like an act of love, self-love.
Yeah, it does.
He's really given me a lot of space. Like I'm not always kind to him. I'll curse him out because I could never do that, you know, before. I'm not always kind when I speak to him about his family, about his parents. So it's a huge act of love. He's given me a lot of space to kind of try to recreate or figure out who I am again.
You know what I find fascinating in it is that if I look at it from like the pendulum, he kind of didn't need as much energy to get out. So he didn't have to swing back as far, but you were so far in, it's almost like now you have to swing all the way back to feel like you're getting your freedom back. You know, there's that kind of back and forth thing we were discussing. Yeah.
It's true.
I had another question, but I asked Bambos just before if you had anything.
Oh, I just see, Leah, that you are catching up with yourself. I was a drug addict for 10 years, so when I came out of the addiction, I also had to swing the other way, and I went completely into health, martial arts, fighting sports, meditation.
What do you mean you went into it? You're still there, man.
But I'm more grounded today. But fuck you, Andy. And feel free to do the same, Leah. But in a way, I had to do that. It wasn't even a choice. I spent most of my childhood feeling suppressed, not being able to express, numbing myself for 10 years. So in a way, once I found my voice at the age of 25, there was no filters.
Yep, I can relate to that. And being I'm newly employed, I just graduated with a master's degree in nursing, and I'm a nurse now, and I'm working for the first time in over 20 years.
Wow.
And I don't put up with anybody's bullshit. I haven't had to, and I don't. And now I'm in an environment where I have bosses and supervisors and co-workers, And I'm not sure how well I'm going to fare in that environment because I'm like, what? This is BS. Why are we doing this? Or who the hell do you think you are? So I know I need to learn how to curb my
enthusiasm.
Yeah, in a healthy manner, but
not to sabotage everything that you're trying to create.
Exactly.
Yeah, isn't it funny though? Because it's like now you saw behind the curtain, you kind of see people are full of shit a lot of the time. And now you're like, okay, so now your authority, what gives you this authority? What that's a bad decision. I'm not going to tolerate that. Like everything you had to like make peace with that other people would maybe compromise on because they got a mortgage and they live in fear and all that stuff. It's you said something earlier, and I, of course, I forget everything that I want to ask you, but then it comes back later, was that you said you were part of groups now that are supporting other groups of individuals leaving the evangelical church. Now, I thought to myself when you said that, my stomach dropped a little bit because I'm like, oh, you've got to be like an enemy of the state. Like there's got to be people that really are like hunting for you because not only did you leave, but now you are the pioneer of supporting others to do the same. So how is that?
It's tough some days. I mean,
you get hate mail?
Not usually. Okay. I mean, my mother-in-law, but nothing's changed really there in the last 2 decades. But yeah, it's difficult because oftentimes when people leave faith, like they lose their family. You know, like I have plenty of friends and folks in my life who have lost relationships with their parents or with their spouses. Like it can be a total shit show. Right. And so you do want to tread lightly in encouraging folks to leave religion. And I'm never, I'm more about having people ask the questions, to not be afraid about asking the questions and making the inquiries. But I know folks personally who have chosen to go back into the church because that's where their community is. That's where their support groups are. That leaves less damage in their relationships with their families. I feel like the biggest piece that I have to offer is a listening ear. You know, like in our local community, just to be that person that people can kind of hash out what it is they're thinking or feeling. And also like the podcast that I do, because oftentimes it's the first time that these women have been able to kind of put their story together. Like they're thinking through what happened. And I remember when I first shared my story, that was so therapeutic for me because oftentimes as you're going through it, you're not thinking about all of the hard, you know, and all of the pain or all of the joy necessarily. And so providing a space where these women can like be on the show and share their story. It's just, and like, I mean, I'm an empath, sometimes on steroids, but I just love being able to hear other women's stories and giving them a space to start finding their voices. Yeah. You know, because we have as women in the evangelical churches often been quelched and squelched, and so I don't get a whole lot of hate mail though, occasionally, but yeah.
That's beautiful.
I welcome it, I guess. If I get it, I'll welcome it and hopefully have a quality conversation with whomever that is that's sending it my way. Yeah.
I have a question, like now from where you are, because you started off by sharing about your grandparents, right? That this was very calm. If you look back at your grandparents from this scope, do you still see the same view, or do you catch any like glimpses of, ooh, she actually did that?
Yeah. When I was a young adult, I discovered all of this shit that was going on behind the scenes at my grandparents' house. So this semblance of peace that I felt as a child was just a facade. There was all kinds of crazy, inappropriate things that were happening behind closed doors. And so before, while I was still in the church, you know, that those pieces came to me. And so I had to do like a rewiring or restructuring of the understanding of what transpired there. Now, as an atheist/humanist, it makes a whole lot of sense to me on why those things were allowed to happen. They believe they had this cover of protection in their home, away from demonic influences, and that was not the case. And so most of my dad's family is still very religious to this day. I don't see them a whole lot because I live 8 hours away from many of them, and I don't visit as much these days because it is hard. And really, they don't have any interest in really making any inquiries about why I am where I am today. It's more they just want to continue to evangelize me to come back to the fold. So it's kind of a boundary I've set up where that's not a space that I want to put myself into. Like if you're not genuinely interested in me and asking me questions about what led me to this transition in our family, I really don't have any interest in being in relationship with you. It's sad, it's hard, but
yeah. I think we've heard a lot of that when we talked, especially with some of the people that have discussed the Mormon Church, where when you get written out of the book, they can't see you in the afterlife. So basically, it's this intense pressure that one has that, hey, if you're written out of the book, then basically after we die, we'll never meet again. So there's this weird, amazing pressure that's put on an individual that, Bolalong, he's mentioned that he says the losing family is the biggest weak point about religion. Why go back where you are held ransom? Yes.
I know. So true.
Yes. You know, I when I was in junior high school, one of the priests was molesting the kids. And I was one of the altar boys at that time. He hugged me for extended periods of time, but I never felt molested, although I'm sure by definition, you know, that would be what we'd call it. But what happened was they shipped him off to Italy, and then he got away with it, and he was put in another church and he molested more kids. So I remember at the time they told my mom that she was not allowed to speak about this, otherwise she would be excommunicated from the church. So in this way, the church was really like support, covering its own ass in the end. And you know, when people discuss, or when I'm talking about why I'm not attracted to religion, because at those young years, I knew at that time that this was going on, and even I was getting 13 years old, but my young mind knew that this was wrong and that there was something that was really like horrible. Yeah.
That's tough stuff.
Yeah.
The man that married my husband and I was a priest from who was a mentor of my husband's when my husband was in high school. And a few years after our wedding, he was accused of molesting young boys in the town my husband grew up in. And my husband doesn't have any recollection of anything inappropriate happening with him, but my in-laws, they can't even talk about it. Don't even want to acknowledge it, and that's just, in my opinion, that's just such a harmful state of mind to be in, because what happens? More kids end up getting molested, at the next place or whatever. But those are some of the obvious pieces when I can equate that religion is harmful.
There was one question that I had, and we're over time, so I do want to be cautious, but Neil Vanderlang also he asked it in his own way. Bambos, I can barely read it because it's so small on my screen.
What would you say were the most decisive factors, arguments that pulled you over the line into becoming an atheist? Was it a very specific moment of clarity on one, or more of a gradual conversation?
And I'd like to interrupt that question and ask one question. In Neil's question, he's already making the assumption that you're an atheist, and I'm wondering if you are an atheist. So I didn't want you to defend that if that wasn't even the case.
I would say yes, I for sure am an atheist. I know that's kind of I have no evidence that there is a God. And I think it's important because one of the decisive factors in pulling me over the line was I was taught in the church that if you're not a Christian person, there can be no good within you. The only good that people have within them is the goodness that God gives to them. And so that would have included my mom when I was a Christian, because she was not a believer. And my mom was one of the most Christian people I knew. Even though she wasn't a Christian, she gave and loved on people. And then my son and my husband, when they left faith, what are they going to turn into now that they don't have God? And they were still nice,
Yeah.
kind, good people.
Why is it that everyone assumes that if you're an atheist, then all of a sudden you'll be morally corrupt? I don't get that. That's just the
eating babies for lunch,
crazy.
murdering all of the people.
Yeah.
But I listened to podcasts by folks who were non-believers, atheists, I listened to debates by people who were atheists. And I can remember the first time I heard Bart Ehrman's voice. Bart Ehrman's again, one of my heroes, but he's this former pastor who studied the New Testament and is no longer a believer. And when I first listened to a podcast, or I guess it would have been a debate back then, and I pushed play and I heard his voice coming across the audio, he was like this sweet, gentle, spirited soul. And I was like, he sounds really nice. Like he's an atheist too. Like, so it was this piece of realizing the realization that you don't have to have God to be a kind, good person.
You know who my favorite atheist is? It's Ricky Gervais.
Love him.
And there was the one line when he had the interview on the talk show, and he said, "We've proven 3,999 religions to be wrong, so I'm just asking you to believe one more."
Yeah, he's a favorite of mine. He's a favorite. And like Penn Jillette, do you guys know Penn Jillette? Penn and Teller?
Yeah.
So they're magicians in Vegas, and Penn is an outspoken atheist and libertarian, as am I politically. And I love him. Just love him. He's kind and good. He's not killing anybody. He's not eating babies for lunch. He's just asking questions. And so I think that was a huge piece for me. Yeah.
Thank you. We've extended over our hour. We had several more questions. Juliana thanks you as well. Murdoch, who just joined us and says it helped her understand why some people in her life are still so indoctrinated. So thanks. So thank you for being with us. It was really incredible.
Thanks for having me.
I now, of course, as I said, Cass, I take his word at it when he says this person has to be on the show. Now it's always like in the middle of the show, I'm like, oh, now I understand why he was so clear on it. So
he's a good friend. He's a special man, Cass.
He is really dear. I was on his show, and then after that, we just became dear friends. So I'm really. So
well, thank you for having me, guys. Pleasure meeting you.
Thank
if I'm ever over in Amsterdam on a trek, I'll look you guys up.
We look forward to seeing you.
All right.
Bye.
Bye. Thank you.
Bye-bye. Hey, Bambos.
Hello, Mr. Shayla.
That was really sweet.
I'm in complete awe.
Me too.
Like, there was a moment where we didn't have to talk anymore as far as I was concerned. Just being with her was enough to feel everything.
Yeah. I mean, when I said it, and I say it again, I sit in so much admiration for people who had to overcome something which seems so arbitrary, because one could continue to have a religion and keep that religion because it's so much more convenient on so many levels. So for her to take the step to move out of it and then deal with all the repercussions from that it's just incredible. And she still is, as we heard, right?
Rediscovering her identity.
Yeah. And almost not even rediscovering. It's almost like it's like discovering for the first time. It sounds like,
I'm 17 years old.
Again. Yeah.
I mean, what were the choices if she stayed in the religion and if she would decide to close her eyes? I mean, then what would be the relationship with her and her son, most importantly?
Yeah. Well, I mean, I would say like what we always say, heal yourself first and then see if you can build a relationship with another. So in some ways, as I heard Leah speak, and it became more and more apparent, is she's still healing the relationship in herself. So in some ways, I see the relationship with the son is a natural consequence of her making more and more peace. Because as she was describing her life, I really could resonate with the fact that she's still undergoing a great amount of change, and I can imagine that can't be easy for her son either, right? Yeah. So it was almost like he got the mom now that he would have wanted to have when he was 12. So now he's sort of like, it's like a staggering of how is she going to develop to a place where they kind of meet each other as adults again, right? And I think that's what happens in life. A lot of times the kids have an expectation of a parent, it's not fulfilled, there's resentment, that kid has a child themselves and they see how hard it is, and then all of a sudden you begin to have a different relationship.
Yeah.
So yeah,
it's a journey.
It's a journey. Well, what a great show that was. Yeah. And we've got a few more this week. I don't know exactly who's coming on. Do you have a list?
Yes, I do, Mr. Shaleth. If you give me 5, 4, 3. Oh shit. Not fast enough.
I love it.
Damn it, I pay for this. Okay, let's see. Tomorrow we have the Unlucky Sperm Club with Nelson.
Wow. The Unlucky Sperm Club. Tesla, I believe his name is. Yes.
Yeah, Tresla.
He has a great story. Basically, his mom was pregnant with him, and basically she was raped by the police officer, and her dad went out and shot and killed the police officer that raped his mom. And he basically was born into this situation where, you know, his grandfather is going to prison for killing the man that raped his mom, and now and it just, he shares that journey of that. I mean, and yeah, wild. So that's tomorrow.
I don't know how I'm supposed to feel about that show. Wow. And like, what courage to come on the show with that one. But looking at his picture, he looks like a very he's grounded it. So looking forward. Chocolate Drop in Corporate America.
Genesis,
Amaris Kemp.
Yeah, Genesis. So she's going to come in. She's doing a lot of diversity training and stuff, and she wrote a book, Chocolate Drop in America, in corporate America. And I thought, we haven't done a lot of diversity shows. I'd love to hear like all the things that we do unconsciously during the show, which show that we're not aware of it. Like that's what I'd love. I'd love if she just like what like Bowl Along once did, like point out this is typical of a thing people do that they're not aware of. Like that, I want to hear during that show. You know.
Great. And we have my dear friend Steven Borchouts, who actually shares his story of meeting a homeless person and trying to give him a life. Supporting him.
I think that's incredible. Picking up a situation where he finds a homeless man that he wants to support. He finds a community to support them. And then all of the challenges, because if someone was homeless, they got there for a reason. And now the question is, if you're helping them, how can you really support them? And how are you just keeping them and where they're not able to support themselves, but you're just continually trying to feed them, give them what they need, and they're not able to actually take responsibility for their own lives to make it work. So I really am interested in that show because I look at it not only on him, but on a meta level, like what is it that we want to do for others that they don't want to do for themselves? And where's that balance and how is he navigating that? I really want to see that. So yeah, that's cool.
Yeah.
So that's it, my friend. I think we can slowly say, it was really great to be with you from sunny, where am I? Wijk aan Zee in the Netherlands.
And I am in Amsterdam in my living room. We're going to do all of that and so much more tomorrow.
A wonderful chaos.